Okay guys, so I'm going to walk you through drawing a fashion croquis in the 9 heads or 10 heads style. So basically the human body has a natural set of proportions that make us look, all pretty similar. We all look fairly proportional as far as that we're symmetrical on both sides, and the length of just our head usually makes up 7 total head lengths in our entire body. So from head to toe, that's sort of the proportional ratio that using our head as one portion of measurement, it takes 7 heads to make up a typical human body. And in fashion illustration, figures are longer and leaner proportions typically. This does make it easier when you're drawing clothes. Honestly, you have a lot more sort of space to work with. And of course, later when you get better at drawing, you can change up your proportions and you can make your fashion figures fuller and more realistic. But we're gonna begin by learning in this classic 9 or 10 head style. So it'll be an elongated fashion figure as we're used to seeing them. Again, you can change this later, but I'm going to show you this style and then you can sort of expand upon it, okay? So we're going to start with a page in our sketchbook. I've got mine ripped out, but you can do it right in your sketchbook, especially if it opens really nice and big. You won't have anything in the way, and we're going to grid our paper so that we can easily start to map out our proportions in the right place. If you want to follow along in the book, that's a really good idea. Page 6 in your fashion sketchbook textbook is going to be where you're going to be pulling these proportions from, and that whole chapter goes over it. So entire of chapter 1 is going to explain it. So I've got my clear drafting ruler, and I've got a mechanical pencil, extra lead, and an eraser. If you have a regular pencil, a little pencil sharpener is going to be your friend. I use a mechanical pencil because I press really, really hard, and a big fat pencil lead, it just ends up looking like a giant marker line for me. It's really difficult to erase. So this just makes it a little easier for me to have more control and be able to erase my mistakes easier. So I love a mechanical pencil, but I do use a point, I don't know if I can focus in, and it'll show you it's probably rubbed off, but it's a .09 lead. It's the thickest lead you can get in a mechanical pencil, because if I use a regular mechanical pencil, I will break it. I just press really, really hard. So I'm saying this because some of you will probably run into that same issue, and so this is the way that I've combated it. But see what you do. Some of you press really, really lightly, and it's the opposite. So see what happens. So let's take our paper, maybe I'll turn it sideways to start, and we're going to use our drafting ruler to start gridding it out. So basically you want to just come down an inch from the top. So line your ruler up. See how I can see through my ruler and I could slide it there. I'm at an inch down from the top, and I could start making grids. So what I'm looking to do is grid out my paper. See, I drew a line, and then I can put my ruler right on top of that line and I can see through it, so it makes it really easy. And look, now I've got 2. So I can make an inch by inch grid all the way down the paper. My paper is 9 by 12, so I should end up having 12 inches gridded out. If you have an 11 by 14, you can go ahead and go all the way down the paper as well. 11 by 14 is a nice preference because it just gives you lots of space on there, not to like be too tight when you're drawing. This will be a little tight for me. I did a practice and I was definitely wishing I had a little more space, but you can totally do it in this space. So see how I'm just drawing a line, placing my ruler right on top of that line, and coming all the way down to grid the paper out. That looks like I was a little shy of my last inch. Okay, so once I've got my paper gridded out, you can even number it. So how many do I have? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and I've got like a little bit of 12. So I'm gonna come down and actually skip one because I know I make my head's a little big. So I'm gonna skip the first one and I'm gonna come down and label 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and we'll go a little bit into 11 there. Okay, and so we're gonna start with the head, right, as our first portion. So up here in the top. And so you just kind of draw a loose oval, okay? And right now I'm gonna be really sketchy. It's gonna be like a stick figure because the important part is that we're getting the proportions down. It's not so much about fleshing it out and making it look really like human or like a proper drawing at this point. We're just getting proportions. So I just do a light little oval here, and I might end up changing this. Usually I come back and making it a little bit bigger as we go. So that's gonna take up one section. The head is gonna end at the end of number 1. 2 is gonna be our neck and shoulders. So what I usually do is come down with 2 lines about halfway. I'm gonna draw an imaginary halfway line here. And then I do the shoulders, okay? And so again, the neck, I'm making it kind of wide, pretty much as wide as my head right now. Like I said, I can make sort of adjustments on that and change it later because I'll probably make my head a little bigger to fit. But I'm kind of dropping straight down, and then again, my shoulders come out at sort of, it makes this like triangle from the head. But I kind of just roughly map out how wide my shoulders are gonna be right now. If you can kind of see and imagine, just think about a human proportion. It's definitely gonna come out wider than the head. It's probably like 2 heads wide if you turned the head sideways. But I just give myself some loose shoulders right now. And what I'm gonna do is come down to about 3.5. So here's the bottom of 3. So I can draw my imaginary half line, basically a little under 3 to get my torso. And what I do is kind of draw this as a sort of triangle like this. And then I'll sort of say, that's my torso, okay? So I've come down and I've kind of linked it in. I've come out from my points of my shoulders, and I've come to about 3.5 or a little under 3. You can make your torsos a little longer, a little shorter, but this usually works. So at about 3.5. And then I do another kind of little triangle for what ends up being sort of like the crotch or the connector in the middle that's gonna connect your legs to your torso, like where your butt is if it's from the back. So that I come out and I do a sort of opposite. So imagine this is at around 4.5. Here's my imaginary line for 4.5. So let's say again, so our shoulders are at 1.5. Shoulders. Our waist is at around a 3.5. The end of sort of the crotch is at 4.5. Okay, so I've got like a little figure started now. And let's give it some legs. And so the legs, I like to come down to 7 for the knee. So again, I'm gonna start in the bottom of 7 is here. I'm gonna come like this. And notice I'm imagining already that I'm coming out for that thigh, that I'm coming out for, imagine like here's my little underwear line, you know? So if I drew in undies, here's how I'm coming down. So even when I'm drawing, I'm starting to get round with my shapes, but I'm still keeping it a really basic stick figure. And I have a lot of this happening where again, I'll make it really boxy to start and then I flesh it out later. So here at 7 is where I'm gonna imagine my knees. And I kind of draw circles for these because they're really joints. You know, that's where you're gonna have movement. You're gonna have this piece connect to this piece, connect to this piece. So I just draw it as a little circle, but we'll say knees are at 7. And then the rest of the leg is gonna be really super long. I like to make mine even longer than I think they do in the book, but I'm gonna come down at least 2 inches and maybe even more to like 9.5. So again, my imaginary line here. So I come down really long. And notice I kind of draw this round shape up here. I'm imagining that calf up there. I'm imagining my round little calf coming into my tiny little ankle, which becomes like almost non-existent. And then so I've already just about gone over my 10 heads here. And this is where I'm gonna add my feet down at the bottom. So I'm gonna come almost practically off my paper into like 10.5. 11. I could probably even make this 12 if I start fleshing her out. But so as you can see, She's got really super long legs. Again, we're imagining she's probably wearing high-heeled shoes, which is why her feet look this way. I do it as this little sort of triangle. I'm all about the triangles and circles in the beginning, and then I flesh it out as we keep drawing. But this kind of gives you a sense that she's like a Barbie doll and she's standing up on her tippy toes, and that's why she's even extra long. That's why she goes even beyond 10 heads into 11, because she's wearing heels. So these are my basic proportions again. So I'm gonna say ankles at 9.5, here, knees at 7, crotch at 4.5, waist at 3.5, shoulders at 1.5, and then let's give her some arms. And so same, they're gonna have, I'm gonna sort of start with like a circle for imagining her shoulder as another pivot point. And her elbow is gonna come at the same point as her waist. Imagine just like if you tuck your elbow and your arm into your waist, that's where it pivots. So the end of the arm is gonna go here to the waistline, to that 3.5, where the elbow is another joint. And then the rest of the arm is gonna drop down to about 5.5, where I've got the hand. And that kind of looks a little funky with the way I've drawn it here, but imagine more as a stick. There we go. We'll kind of, maybe we'll just erase that. And again, I pressed so hard, it's usually hard for me to erase over what I did. But there we've got the forearm that comes just to kind of the end of 5, just a little bit over, and then the hand is sort of almost a whole head size in itself, and it drops down to 6. So let's do it on this side too, where we can see a little bit better. So again, we were gonna have that arm come down, and then I can start to try to flesh this out so it looks a little more human-like and not like a creepy alien stick figure. And then there's her forearm into her hand there. And I've got this kind of covering up her body. So it makes us hard for it to see. But you can see how the proportions start to make shape. And now what I always notice is, see, I've got these really long legs, I've got these long arms to match. Really now I look back at her, it looks like her head is like super tiny. So this is where I usually come back and bring her head even higher up, and she looks a lot more proportional. And I'll bring her neck out a little bit there. And by the time she has hair, honestly, she's probably like up here. But this is like her basic head. So it's like in my giant long figure, it's even about 1.5, honestly. But I usually adjust that after the fact. I start with my basic shape up there with the head, and then I make adjustments. And again, you could kind of toggle these arms around. So her waist and her hips. And now I'm just kind of like drawing over top and double checking that my proportions are starting to make shape. And see, I'm kind of imagining where her arm would bend there. But again, this is still a joint. This is a pivot point. Any place where I've drawn a circle, this is where you can take this and move it, and it could change like out to the side, could move around a bit. And again, so her legs coming to that pivot point, and her super long. And again, if it was me, I'd honestly take this down off of the page and make super long calves to give her this really long body that I kind of can't even like show entirely on the screen here. And then again, by fleshing her out a little bit, she starts to look a little more human. But the idea is that I've got the right proportions. Honestly, I feel like this one arm seems like it's hanging, and this is where I would start to analyze and make sure, like this one seems a little low. So maybe I've just made that hand too big in proportion. So I can come back up. Good thing I press so hard, makes it really hard. I don't know if that makes it any better or about the same. What if we took her whole arm and put it even up, right? So imagine we just did here, but she was giving us a high five. Could we do that? Let's see. Is that the same set of proportions? Like she's like, hey. Looks a little unnatural. Don't know if I love it. But the idea is the same, that basically half of her arm is kind of like 2 inches if you really think. It's about midway through this point, and 1 full inch here, and the bottom part of her arm is more like 1.5 inches, and then her hand not quite a full head's amount up there. So what we're going to do basically is using the textbook and following along with these set of proportions. I want you to map out your paper. I want you to start creating some very rough stick figure fashion sketches that are in this style of following these basic proportions and showing me that you're hitting in the right spots or very close to it. Again, there's a little variance. You can make your legs a little longer if you wanted, maybe make your torso, I mean, ever so slightly, but we really want to keep in these proportions. And what I want you to do is I want you to do 6 like this that are really rough, really sketchy. I want you to do them basically right now. I want you to upload them by the end of Wednesday night so that I have time to go in and look at what you've done and make comments and tell you kind of where you're hitting the wrong marks and what's not right. And then by the end of the week, on Sunday night, you will have created fashion croquis that are a lot more in line with these proportions, and they're following the correct proportions and they're looking good, and you're starting to now take some of these joints and move them around and make your own shapes and poses, okay? But start with this, just get really sketchy and focus on hitting the proportions. Focus on kind of getting it in the right shape, and then we'll worry more later about fleshing it out and making it look like she's a human and not a monster, and making the poses that she's doing a little more fun or more realistic or whatever the case may be. I guess I should also go ahead, maybe I could give her some boobs. I usually don't. I'll usually just do like that. I'll just do like shadow where breasts might be. That usually does it for me, but again, they'd be kind of there. They'd be like under, sort of under her armpit, sort of at mid 2.5 if you wanted to start fleshing those out now, but I kind of don't even stress it. I kind of worry more about hips and legs, and I feel like the torso is just like forgotten. Okay, see what you can do, see what you can come up with. Try to start doing this now so we can start making mistakes now so that I can give you advice now.